Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's web seminar. My name is Mike Perkowski with TechTarget. I'm pleased to be your moderator today. Today's program is entitled SMBs Need Improved Defenses to Protect Remote Workers. This is obviously very timely, very topical, and very important considering what's going on in the world at large, but especially within the work environment. We're fortunate to have Citrix as our sponsor for today's program. We thank them for their support. We have two expert speakers who are going to be presenting some information about this topic and also answering a few of your questions in a Q&A program at the back of our presentations today. First, we're going to hear from Aaron Goldberg, CEO of Content for IT. Aaron is a longtime leading industry analyst, having led analyst programs at IDC, Computer Intelligence, and Ziff Davis Market Intelligence. Aaron will be joined by Eric Kenny, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Citrix. Between Aaron and Eric, we're going to cover a lot of ground. So let's get started. I'm going to turn the program over to our first presenter, and that's Aaron Goldberg. Aaron, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mike. I'm pleased to be here today because while we're not certainly, the remote work trend is not novel any longer, that it's been something we've been dealing with for a number of months. The reality is we still need to improve our defenses, particularly for small and medium-sized organizations that don't have the luxury of large security teams that many larger firms and enterprises do. Part of the reason we need to put such a focus on securing remote work, it not only is our current reality, but it's going to be our future reality. No one's going back quickly, and there are many that doubt we'll ever go back to 100% work from the office perspective. If you look at some of the data, 62% of employees believe that they're going to work remotely at least a third of the time at the end of this year. And according to Tech Republic, more than half of SMBs plan on continuing remote work as well. So the trend will absolutely stay in place. And part of the reason why is productivity has remained at a reasonably high level. And no one has certainty as to what the outcome of the pandemic will be. So it's hard to guess when we'll go back into the office. In fact, many of the people I know that either own or are senior executives at small and mid-sized companies are telling us that they don't expect their employees back before the 1st of December in any meaningful way. So we have to get ready to support a better security strategy because it's going to be imperative to do this going forward. As with any brand new usage model or new way that people interact with digital systems, cyber attackers are going to focus on new work styles, new use cases, because they will often represent a more vulnerable method of attack and an attack vector that they can take advantage of. We're already seeing that. A survey shows that 52% of employees believe they can get away with riskier behavior working from home. When you couple that with the fact that many home networks are not well defended, some don't even have a password enabled, that many home devices have no security, or they're using many other unique devices like game systems or cameras that are easily hacked that are on that home network and provide a point of entry, it's a serious problem. We're also seeing an increase in VPN hacks. So even that first line of defense we thought would protect us really doesn't. We're also seeing a tremendous increase in phishing attacks. As people work on their home system, they have their home email account, and anybody that has a Google Mail or a Yahoo Mail or any third-party mail solution, mailbox on their system knows that's where all your phishing emails come. And we also look at a cross-infection problem from a child or a spouse's computer. Many kids, even teenagers, are not very good at cybersecurity hygiene. So as we start to consider the risks and we start to look at the problems, it becomes very clear that even if we're able to protect that device that our worker uses, we may not be protecting our whole organization. And frankly, this environment of work from home is target rich. There's a lot of value to penetrating these systems for the attackers. There's access to critical corporate data. As we work from home, we're finding that personally identifiable information for HR teams is on that home system. Sensitive financial information may be on the system. We may have our PO or billing system there, and if that's accessed, we could find false invoices that drain our company money. And credential theft is becoming rife. That with one compromised system, all of a sudden we've got the credentials to key corporate systems, some of the things that maybe your ADP service or your other payroll service, we're finding that that's also the problem of your personal credentials may be stolen as well. In addition, most SMBs have very few managed devices. There's unmanaged devices everywhere. They have inconsistent security stacks. Some have antivirus, some don't. Some may have a VPN, some don't. Some may have intrusion detection tools, some may not. Some may be encrypted, some aren't. So for the small IT team of an SMB, this is a nightmare because nothing looks the same. And unfortunately, that results in a problem where trust in personal devices is at far too high a level. We're not taking the normal stance we might take in a business of assuming zero trust. We're actually assuming way too much trust. And another problem that comes up here as we look at protecting the remote workforce, and particularly in SMBs, is not just our employees are working from home, but the IT admins are working from home. And again, if we go into the same vulnerabilities that exist in a home environment, they exist for IT admins just as much as they do for employees. While they may be smarter about dealing with it and they may have a little more protection in place, the reality is that they are being attacked as well. And because we don't see a lot of SMBs that have documented security policies or practices, there can be numerous weak links or blind spots. And if you can't see it, you can't protect it. And one of the interesting parts that not many people talk about here is if you're a small and medium business and you have access to a larger company's systems because they're a partner, it's somebody you order from, they're a supplier to you, or it's somebody you service, so you have access to maybe their invoicing system so you can send them bills. This can be a huge problem. After all, as we all remember, the Target attack did not start as an attack on Target's own IT systems. It started as an attack on a small HVAC vendor that was compromised, and the attackers used the credentials that were from that compromised HVAC vendor in Pennsylvania to enter Target systems. So you may be unfortunately liable for a much larger breach and not even know it. And again, SMBs kind of are a particular risk here because there's less sophisticated tools for identifying breaches or data exfiltration in place. Again, it's a matter of budget, and a lot of these tools are expensive. Not enough cybersecurity vendors focus on providing what I call SMB side solution. We also don't have the luxury of a large SecOps team. We have limited IT resources. They're stretched thin. They're they're jack of all trades, master of none. And cybersecurity is a difficult thing just even hire people to do. Often there are less stringent management of permissions because everybody wears a lot of hats, because a salesperson might also send out invoices and they may also be the one checking inventory. That salesperson may have a lot of permissions that when their account or when their credentials are compromised, they can get in everywhere. And also a few SMBs have standing or in-house security teams. I've talked about that, but that's just the reality we face. This makes partnering with vendors that understand the SMB, that provide SMB-style solutions, particularly important. I've painted a grim picture, and I don't mean to do that, but it's more a reality check. And as part of that reality check, let's talk about what an SMB should do. First, look for partners that provide enterprise-class remote security, but do it on an SMB budget. They do exist. They are out there. In fact, if you look at our sponsor today, they have a great solution. You want to find a comprehensive platform that uses automation to ensure protection is effectively implemented. You just don't have the resources to treat every one of your workers' devices, their home networks, and all devices on that home network one at a time. So you want a platform that uses automation to ensure consistent security across everyone working remotely. You also want to focus on cloud-based solutions. This simplifies operations. It takes a load off your internal IT team or your IT person. Let someone else handle all the hard parts. Let you get the protection. You also want to demand strong endpoint management protection across a wide range of device types. The reality is that most SMBs, people that are working remotely, are going to have a lot of different brands of PCs. They're going to be using smartphones, some iOS, some Android, some Macs, some PCs. So you want to be sure that all the most popular endpoint types and styles and operating systems are protected with strong endpoint management. And finally, one thing to consider is implementing a zero trust approach. That's beginning with the fact that whoever you are, we don't believe you. And in a way, that's important because what it lets you do is ensure that you're not starting with vulnerabilities, you're not starting in a vulnerable style, but you're really starting clean and securely. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Eric and we'll find a little bit more about what you can actually do, how to implement it, and the benefits of the solution.
Thank you so much, Aaron. And since you astutely recommended that SMBs consider a zero trust approach as they start off in this security journey, I thought that I would start off by talking about the Citrix approach to zero trust and different things that SMBs can do to implement zero trust by partnering with Citrix. So when we look at our definition and how we're helping our customers implement a zero trust framework or architecture for their company, the first thing that's important to understand is that we want to take a collective or a holistic approach to zero trust. And what we don't want to do is just take a collection of point products, which is, I think, what a lot of SMBs are doing today. So they might have one tool for secure file sharing. They might have a mobile device management tool. They might have an app launcher, another single sign-on tool. And what that does is it creates a lot of complexity when you have all these different point products. And we know that complexity is the enemy of security. So with Citrix, what we want to do, as I mentioned, is take that collective kind of holistic approach and consolidate that into one solution where you can have a centralized dashboard that helps you create a consistent set, a common policy framework that you can apply to all of your users. And what that's going to do is help you simplify things. So that way you're not having to log into multiple different dashboards to create those policies, but then also to extract data to understand where your risk may lie, and then kind of create a cohesive story from those different systems that are spitting out that data to you to try to understand where your risk is located. With Citrix, you're going to be able to get a view into how people are sharing files, the different types of applications that they're accessing, when they're accessing them, how they're accessing them, the different networks they're accessing them from, the different types of devices that they're using. So it really is going to give you that 360-degree view of each user in your organization and the potential risks that they might pose to the organization. And the first thing that you really have to consider when you're talking about zero trust or how to implement a zero trust framework is the login. We know that that's where a lot of these security breaches come from. The Verizon data breach report from a few years ago showed that 80% of data breaches can be logged to credential theft. So attackers are out there, whether they're on the dark web or whether they're installing malware stealing, credential stealing malware on your computer. This is the source of a lot of the data theft that we are seeing out there in the market today. There is really good news, though. There was some research done by our friends at Microsoft, and what they found was, after analyzing all sorts of different data breaches, was that 99.9% of credential-related theft could have been stopped with multi-factor authentication. So that is something that we are going to offer to all of our customers when they are accessing all their corporate resources through Citrix Workspace. And multi-factor authentication is really simple to implement, and it's really simple for your end users to adopt. So it's going to help them feel secure, and it's going to make you more secure because it is such a simple and not complex thing to implement in your organization. So the way that this works is that a user will go to their Citrix Workspace, enter their username and password, and from there, they're going to have to take out a secondary device. So obviously, everyone is carrying a phone on them with these days, and on that phone, you're just going to have a second authenter application. You can get it natively from Citrix. You can use one from Microsoft. There's another one from Google. There's a whole host of different authenter applications out there that you can use that will provide a time-based one-time password. And that's going to generate a code, much like you're seeing on the screen here. And the end user will enter that code into their authentication screen on Workspace. And once that code has been validated, it will give them access to everything that they need within their own personal workspace. Again, it's a great tool because so much of the data that we're seeing, so much of the data exfiltration that is happening is directly related to weak passwords or passwords that are being reused across multiple services. And multi-factor authentication is a great way to prevent against those credential attacks. So that is something that we want to provide to all of our SMB customers so they can secure their data. Okay, so once somebody has actually logged in with Citrix Workspace, what you'll see here is everything they need to do to get their work done, because Citrix Workspace is the platform for work. The first thing I want to start off with is the micro apps in the feed. So you can see here, we have a link where a user can request PTO. Normally, if I want to request PTO, I would actually have to go to my HR application or the human capital management application that my company uses. These applications obviously have a ton of functionality with them, but most of that doesn't apply to me because I'm in marketing. I'm not somebody that's in HR. There's only a couple things that I need out of my HR application, things like requesting PTO or doing a performance review a couple of times a year. When I want to take those actions, it's a little bit bulky, it's a little bit cumbersome because I have to navigate to that app. Because I only use it a few times a year, I probably forgot my username and password, so I have to reset that. Once I get that, I log into the app. I have to navigate in and find out where I have to request that PTO, find out my balance, and make that submission. And that could take 6 to 8 minutes, which will impact my productivity on the day. With a micro app, we're actually just delivering that functionality of being able to request PTO within Workspace without having to navigate to that native application. So when I click on that link, a blade is going to open up and it's going to let me see my balance, my PTO balance, enter start and end date for my PTO and hit submit. So that process that takes 6 to 8 minutes now takes 6 to 8 seconds, which is obviously going to be a huge productivity boost. From a security perspective, there's huge benefits as well. One is that we are reducing the attack surface. So I don't need to navigate to that application and enter my username and password. We know that most employees are using somewhere from 10 to 20 different applications to do their job. And if each one requires a separate username and password, that creates a lot of risk for the organization because the human brain isn't designed to manage that many passwords. So what we do is we reuse passwords across services, or we use ones that are really easy to use, but also easy to crack. So by aggregating everything within Workspace and just surfacing the functionality that the end user needs to do their job effectively, we are reducing that attack surface, which in turn makes you safer. The other thing that does is that it's going to facilitate least privilege. So this is a concept of zero trust that says people should only have access to the functionality and the applications that they need to do their jobs effectively. As I mentioned before, I'm in marketing, so I don't need I shouldn't have a ton of access to that HR or human capital management application because it's not relevant to my job. So by only surfacing the actions that are necessary for me, or the only things that I should be able to do within Citrix Workspace, we are helping to facilitate least privilege and making sure that people aren't taking actions that they shouldn't within these different applications. So next up is apps. So we know that from talking to our customers, there's a multitude of apps that they need to deliver to their employees so they can do their jobs effectively. So that includes SaaS apps, so things like Salesforce, Dropbox, Workday, really important, really widespread apps that people are using to stay productive. It can include homegrown web apps, so an internally built system that they are delivering through the web. And it can also include a virtual application or a virtual desktop as well. The great news is that with Citrix Workspace, that is all going to be delivered within the workspace through single sign-on with multi-factor backed up behind it to really secure that login process, but then also make sure that people aren't context switching and having to jump between applications and desktops to do their job, which in turn reduces that attack surface, which we talked about before. Next up is all of the files. So we know it's not just access to apps that are necessary in order to get work done, but it's also files as well. And we know from talking to our customers is that most of their files aren't just located in one repository. They might have a legacy on-prem file server for their network shares, a SharePoint site that they use to share documents, but then also a cloud-based service like Box or Dropbox that they're using for additional storage as well. And with Workspace, we're able to aggregate all of those different data sources into one place. So again, we're reducing context switching, reducing that attack surface, and facilitating least privilege by delivering everything in one single place. And the last two things are the search capabilities and the virtual assistant, which will help just with some productivity benefits, being able to search across all the different files within the organization so you can find what you're looking for when you need it. But then also being able to deflect questions, commonly asked questions from teams that normally might have to answer them, like when are company holidays and what is our PTO policy, things of that nature with the virtual assistant. And something that was interesting when the stay-at-home orders really started being implemented back in late February, early March, we kind of saw a panic from a lot of our customers. They had to send their entire workforces home, and it was something that not a lot of them had prepared for. They didn't have a business continuity plan in place. So as they figured, how are we going to get everybody access to everything they need to stay productive, a lot of them made the decision to dust off the VPN that they had lying around and give everybody access to the resources through that VPN. Once they did that, though, they quickly realized there are a lot of security issues that come along with making that VPN available to everybody within the organization. That first issue was that it was really hard to scale. Most VPNs are appliance-based, so that required procuring some additional hardware or appliances, and then actually the IT staff having to go to the data center to implement that. And that was a challenge for a lot of them because of stay-at-home orders and people having to work in close proximity to each other really created a lot of challenges for a lot of organizations. The great thing with Citrix Workspace is that it's available as a cloud-based solution that can scale up and down as your demand increases. So if you do just have a small segment of workers today that you want to give access to, but there's another emergency and you need to send everybody home, you can scale up and scale down very easily. Everybody's going to have access to everything that they need without an interruption in service or without an interruption in connectivity as they get access to those critical resources they need to do their job effectively. The next big benefit is that we're providing access only at the application layer. So a big problem with VPNs that we see is that credentials are easily stolen. And if you don't have multi-factor authentication in place, it's really easy for an attacker to get those credentials, log into the VPN, and from there, they're going to have free reign throughout the network. They can perform privilege escalation attacks and really get access to information and data and take that information and data, which is obviously going to be a big negative for the organization that happens to as they suffer from a data breach. With Workspace, as you saw on the previous slide, we're providing access to applications at the application layer. So even if credentials were compromised and an attacker were to get access, they're only going to be able to get access at the application layer. They are not going to be able to navigate throughout the network, perform those privilege escalation attacks to get access to really sensitive company data. Next is that it's going to provide the best user experience. Most VPNs are implemented for kind of niche use cases and for specific users within the organization. So think about, road warrior salespeople that are, logging on from an airport or from a hotel for a few hours, to do some work, or a field worker, who from their cars, accessing the VPN to fill out a report after visiting a customer. It is really meant for intermittent use by just a handful of the workers within an organization. As we saw, though, when the entire workforce got sent home, everybody was on the VPN all day long, and that created huge experience issues for a lot of our customers. I saw a story the other day that said they did a study of workers in the UK, and what they found was that those workers were actually losing more time in productivity due to poor connectivity issues from their VPN than they had from their commute. That their commutes were taking less time than the time that they were wasting trying to reconnect to their VPN. So there's some huge experience issues, which obviously we know when there are experience issues, people start looking for workarounds, and that creates security issues because they start, doing things outside of the view of IT, which Aaron talked about in, during his portion of the presentation. The other thing I would mention here too is that Workspace is going to give choice when it comes to the type of device that employees use to get work done. And this is a huge from an employee experience perspective because people are more productive when they use the device that they are most comfortable with, and it's the device that they want to use. But that does bring a security risk as well because when the organization doesn't have insight into that device, any potential malware on it, any potential risk that brings, that can create a security risk or a data breach down the road. So we're going to talk a little bit more about how we work with unmanaged devices and how we're going to secure unmanaged devices a little bit later on. And then lastly, only corporate data is going to flow through Workspace and through the data center. Whereas with the VPN, if I take a break and check Facebook or check my personal bank account while I'm connected to the VPN, that information flows through the corporate data center. And we've heard from a lot of employees from our customers that they have big concerns about accessing personal information through the corporate VPN because they are unsure of what's going to be exposed to their employer and how their employer is going to use that information. So with Citrix Workspace, we keep that separated with where only the corporate data is going to be flowing through Workspace and in turn the data center. On the previous slide, I talked a little bit about how personal devices can create risk for organizations. And a lot of that comes from malware that is being distributed out there in response to this pandemic. So one of the things that we see a lot is a huge increase in spoofing sites of web conferencing solutions like Zoom and WebEx and GoToMeeting, where these go up really quickly, are designed to steal credentials or inject malware onto devices, and then they go away. And some of the most severe types of malware that we're seeing out there are keylogger or screenshot malware. Keylogger malware, they both do exactly what they sound like, but keylogger malware, once it gets onto your device, it's going to capture all the keystrokes that you actually enter into your device. So as you're logging into your VPN with your username and password, that information is going to be captured by the attacker. As you enter sensitive corporate information into an email, that information is going to be captured by an attacker. Screenshot malware does something very similar, where that when the malware is installed on the device, it takes periodic screenshots of what is presented on your screen, and then it is delivered to a remote server that is only accessible by the hacker. So if you are in a regulated industry like a finance or a healthcare, that can lead to compliance violations because data has been exfiltrated from your organization. So if you have customer information or patient information, or if you work in HR and you're looking at a report that has employee names, birthdays, addresses, social security numbers, you're creating a huge security risk for your organization because all that information is going to be breached through that screenshot malware. So how are we helping protect organizations that have employees that are using unmanaged devices to access their corporate resources? So I talked a little bit before about the keylogger malware, where that type of malware will take all of the keystrokes that you entered into your device and will harvest them for later use by the attacker. We actually have some anti-keylogger capabilities within Citrix Workspace that will actually scramble the keystrokes that are entered into the device. So what is returned to the attacker is indecipherable text. So if I'm using this, if an employee is using an unmanaged device to access their workspace, even if they have that keylogger malware on their device, when they enter their credentials into Citrix Workspace, the attacker is going to get nothing, because we are going to scramble and hash all that text that is sent to the attacker, which will obviously make it unusable to that person. Next is protection from the dangers of the internet. So I talked about the spoofing sites before. There's a lot of other dangers on the internet that can lead to malware on devices, which in turn can lead to a data breach. So an approach that we're taking to this is first is web filtering. So you're able to block either specific sites that you don't want your employees to visit, or categories of sites like torrenting or gambling or social media, to really prevent any security risks that are posed by employees visiting those sites. Now, web filtering is fantastic for known bad sites. If you know that a site is bad and you don't want somebody to go to it, web filtering is an amazing tool. What it doesn't protect against, though, is zero-day attacks. So these sites that spring up that are designed to spoof a real site so they can steal your credentials or inject malware, they're up for 24 or 48 hours and then they're taken down. Web filtering software has a hard time recognizing what those sites are and identifying them as malicious sites and blocking your users from actually accessing them. So in response to that, we built browser isolation, which is a remote cloud-based browser that users can use to access web apps or navigate the web. And if they end up on a site that is intended to inject malware on their device, that malware is actually just going to end up on that remote browser, which is hosted in Citrix Cloud, away from your network, away from the user's device. So even if they do end up on one of those bad sites that does try to inject malware onto the device, it's going to stay completely away, isolated from everything that they're doing, and will never hit any of your corporate resources, which in turn keeps you very safe. That browser is disposed of at the end of the session. So it really does solve the problem of these zero-day attacks that we're seeing that are based on these spoofing sites or any kind of web-borne dangers. And then lastly, being able to stop the compromise of data from the anti-screen capture malware that I talked before. So with Citrix Workspace, we have a capability that anytime that screenshot malware tries to take a screenshot of what is on the user screen, instead of returning what is actually presented by the user, it will return a blank screenshot. So again, even if that malware is present on the device, a device that is unmanaged and that IT doesn't have any visibility into, we are helping keep data safe by just returning a blank screen if that screenshot malware is present on the device. Next is security controls and analytics. So we know that there's not much of an IT department, if any, at most small businesses. So we want to provide some automation and some machine learning that you can leverage to understand what's happening with your users and then take automated action when they do detect an anomaly. So for example, I'm based in South Florida, work from 9 to 6. I work off my MacBook every day. It knows those patterns and knows that that's a typical day in the life for me when it comes to work. So if it now detects that I'm logging in from a Windows machine in Australia in the middle of the night, East Coast time, something weird is happening. I've probably been hacked. And then it can take automated action, doing things like logging users out of sessions, expiring shared links from file sharing tools to make sure that your data is protected. And of course, all that leads to a secure BYO program, whether they're using iOS, whether they're using Android, a MacBook, a Windows machine, really helping you offload the device management that you might be doing, and really letting people use the device that they want to use, and really giving them device choice and freedom of choice in order to really kind of enhance the employee experience and make sure that they are really productive. And Mike, I think that is it for me. Were there any questions that we can answer?
Great. Thank you very much, Eric and Aaron. Great presentations. And yes, we do have some questions from the audience. So let's jump into it. Eric, first one is for you, but I'm also going to want Aaron to chime in after your response. Our audience member wants to know, what's the first thing an SMB should do to start on their security journey?
Yeah, I think I would recommend multi-factor authentication as the first thing that they can do. As I mentioned, so many of the data breaches can be sourced back to credential theft or a credential breach, and 99.9% of attacks can be stopped just by implementing multi-factor authentication. It's a really simple, straightforward thing to do from the IT kind of side of the business, but then also it's something that I think end users are familiar with and are comfortable with. So you're going to be able to get user adoption really easily as well. So I think it's a win-win for both the organization and the user to make sure that everything is protected with a really simple, straightforward solution.
Great. Aaron, how about you? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, actually, I'm going to start kind of with a higher level up and just say, admit you probably can't do it yourself. That even if you have people that are pretty smart, you have people that have some IT experience, even if you happen to have some security expertise on board, the threats, the style of threats, the stack necessary to provide reasonable protection is really hard to do yourself. And the amount of time, effort, money it takes to do it yourself may not be worth it. So to me, the first thing is starting with the understanding that you're going to need a partner, you're going to need help, because the attackers are no longer socially awkward teenagers sitting in basements. They are well-financed, state-sponsored or organized crime-sponsored syndicates that are looking for your money. And if you don't believe that, talk to anybody that's been hit by ransomware.
Great. Let's go to our next question, Eric, for you. You spoke about an isolated browser as a way to protect against security risks on the internet. We already have a web filtering in place that blocks access to risky websites. Is that not enough?
Yeah, it's a good question. So as I mentioned, a web filtering tool is great for those known bad sites. So if somebody wants to go to Pirate Bay, it's great to block access to that, because we know that that is a haven for malware and a really effective distribution tool for malware. So blocking that is really simple to do. But then as I mentioned, those 0-day attacks, it's really hard for those web filtering tools to block access to those sites, because there's so little data associated with those sites that go up and go down within 24 to 48 hours. The other thing I would point out too is that for some employees, they're kind of in a gray area. And the example that I use is your social media team, right? So social media is also a very efficient platform for distributing malware. So yes, you could just block access to Facebook and Twitter and not worry about it. But of course, your social media team needs access to those sites to do their job effectively. So by putting in a remote browser and having your social media team access those sites through an isolated remote browser, you're ensuring that they can stay productive and get their work done. But then on the flip side, you're also keeping the organization secure, because if they do happen to click on the wrong link and end up on the wrong website that is trying to get malware on that device, you're still protected because of the security steps that you took by having them use that remote isolated browser.
Great, Eric. This is another really good one for you. We get this all the time from not just SMBs, but the enterprise IT folks as well. I don't have time to log into multiple dashboards to attempt to figure out if there's a security problem. Do you offer any automation with your security products?
Yeah, for sure. As I mentioned in the last slide, we do have some automation that's available that really looks at everything within the organization. As I talked about in the front end of the presentation, we hear from a lot of our customers that they do have those point products, for the different things that they need within their organization. And they really have to piece together that story from all those different tools to get an understanding of where that security risk lies and things that they might have to do to make themselves more secure. We know that SMBs don't have time for that by any stretch of the imagination. So with Citrix, you're actually able to take that holistic view of devices, applications, files, networks, and really get that view of everything that's happening with each specific user and any risk that they might be presenting to the organization. And then when it does identify that risk, as I mentioned, being able to take that automated action of locking them out of the account or making sure that no more files are shared really does go a long way. We hear from a lot of SMBs that they might be using security tools that provide a notification that something weird might be happening. The last thing an SMB owner needs is a text message or an email at 2 o'clock in the morning to let them know that one of their employees is accessing a file in off hours. A false positive might happen. Wake them up in the middle of the night and have them check something out that is nothing. So by being able to have that holistic view of all these different things that are happening and all the different types of technology and how their users are interacting with it, and then being able to take that automated action instead of just a notification, really is a big win for SMBs.
Great. And Aaron, because cybersecurity is not a static phenomenon, this is probably a good way to end. Will attackers devise new threats to target remote work beyond what we've already seen?
Absolutely, Mike. It's very interesting. We've seen so many clever styles of attack, like social engineering attacks, where people learn about you through your social media and say, hey, you love Norman Rockwell paintings. Here's a picture of one I collected, and it's actually malware embedded in the JPEG. So, the reality is not only will there be new attacks and new types of attacks where we use new technologies, but we'll see new attack vectors. Expect that your kid's Nintendo machine or your PlayStation, the Nest thermostat you have, a Ring doorbell camera, all those are entrances into your home network, into your machine, and all problematic. And I'm probably missing 25 other options that the attackers out there are already working on, because they're smart, they're well financed, and they're highly capable.
And on that note, we're going to end our program. I want to thank Aaron Goldberg and Eric Kenny for their presentations and for answering your questions today. Again, we want to acknowledge and thank Citrix for their sponsorship of this program. We appreciate their support. And last but not least, we want to thank all of you who attended this program. We appreciate your taking a few minutes out of your busy day to learn more about this topic. So on behalf of our sponsor, our presenters, and TechTarget, thank you very much for joining us, everyone. We hope you have a great day.